U.S. intelligence officials have concluded COVID-19 was, quote, not man-made or genetically modified. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence has been looking into this. In a statement Thursday, it said U.S. policymakers have been provided with critical support from the intelligence community, adding that it will, quote, continue to rigorously examine emerging information about the origins of the outbreak. For more, let's bring in Olivia Gazis. She's a CBS News intelligence and national security reporter. Olivia, thanks very much for joining us. If this virus was not man-made, where are officials focusing their attention now as they look into its origins?
Well, so Elaine, the statement you just showed from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence did two important things. One, as you point out, it ruled out definitively that this virus was in any way genetically manipulated, artificially created, man-made, bioengineered. It put that to rest and said the U.S. intelligence community effectively agrees with the scientific consensus that this was a naturally derived, naturally occurring virus. Two, it put on the record what a lot of news outlets, including CBS News, have been reporting in recent weeks, which is that the intelligence agencies have not yet ruled out the possibility that the virus originally spread from a lab accident in Wuhan, China. What it did not say, and this is very important, is that it is ascribing any more weight to that theory than to the original one that emerged, which was that this virus was passed from an infected animal to a human, possibly at the site of a wet market in Wuhan, China. So the thing that it didn't say is just as important as the things that it did put on the record today, and we can assume from that only that analysts are continuing to collect and assess information about the origins of the virus's spread.
So we have heard some scientists say that this coronavirus came from bats. So where's the speculation over a lab in Wuhan coming from?
So proponents of that theory, and we should probably note that some of them are in the White House and some of them are allies of the president, have pointed to what is mainly circumstantial evidence. One of those being that the wet market in Wuhan, where Chinese authorities originally said that the virus spread from, happens to be located pretty close to several bioresearch facilities where research on bat coronaviruses in particular is carried out. Two, that at least one of those facilities was flagged by State Department officials in 2018 for having inadequate safety protocols in place. And three, that some of the earliest known confirmed cases of COVID-19, the disease that is caused by this virus, did not actually have exposure to that wet market originally flagged by Chinese officials. In fact, the earliest known confirmed case had no direct exposure to that wet market at all. So all of that, along with some, by now documented obfuscation by Chinese authorities about the domestic spread, about the timing of human-to-human transmission, has all fueled the plausibility of this theory that the lab scenario in fact took place.
Well, both President Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo have blamed China for concealing early information about the virus. But can China be held accountable for a global pandemic? And if so, what kind of consequences could it face from the Trump administration?
Well, both the president and the secretary have alleged that China can and will be held accountable for the spread of this pandemic. It's as yet unclear what those consequences might be. There was some reporting late today that the administration will convene a panel of officials to consider whether those consequences are financial, diplomatic, legal, some combination of all of those things. It's also an open question as to whether the Trump administration can get a sufficient number of allies on its side to agree that these are consequences that the Chinese can be held liable for and should be exacted and should face costs for. It's also an open question as to whether imposing those costs wouldn't be even more economically damaging given just what state we are in at the moment. What the president made clear is that he is intent on exacting some kind of cost. In an interview this week with Reuters, he said that the Chinese handling of the pandemic was directly tied to their desire to see him not reelected in November. So for better or worse, he seems to have made this personal.
Well, how does this very public blame game affect intelligence efforts to trace the source of the virus?
The honest answer is that it shouldn't, but there is a possibility that it could. Coincidentally or not, the statement today from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence came on the heels of a pretty fulsome report from the New York Times that suggested that senior policymakers within the administration, including the Secretary of State, may be applying undue pressure on intelligence analysts to link the Wuhan lab with the spread of the virus. And that is something that is problematic if analysts indeed respond to that pressure and start sort of orienting themselves, seeing evidence that fits that scenario rather than any number of other scenarios. That said, it's important to note that the intelligence community is used to being asked by the White House for answers to inherently political questions. It's incumbent on those analysts to separate any political considerations, real or perceived, from the work that they have in front of them. And furthermore, it's incumbent on the leadership of the intelligence community to then, if they notice that a policymaker goes out and says something that isn't true, that misconstrues or otherwise misstates intelligence that they've been delivered, to reel that back in and say, in fact, this is not what our intelligence analysts handed over.
So just to be clear, Olivia, I mean, is it uncommon, according to the New York Times, Secretary Pompeo was among a group of administration officials, rather, who had been pressing intelligence agencies about the origins of this virus. Is that uncommon? And explain for us, I mean, normally when these intelligence analysts conduct their fact-finding and fact-gathering process, how does that work?
Right. So ideally, analysts will have adequate time and resources and bandwidth to take a look at an entire constellation of intelligence and sort of make sense of it as they go. Intelligence, of course, can take any number of formats. It can be human sources on the ground, volunteering observations about what they witnessed unfolding in Wuhan. It can be signals intelligence, meaning telephone intercepts or electronic intercepts that intelligence agencies also manage to collect. It can be satellite imagery from overhead. It can be open source information that they find, Chinese officials or doctors or citizens posting online about circumstances on the ground. Ideally, they will assemble all of that, take the time that they need to weigh it, and then come to an assessment that they can deliver to policymakers as to these are the facts as we understand them to have unfurled. What is also possible is that intelligence agencies cannot arrive at any sort of conclusion. They can say it is that we simply do not have a smoking gun, we do not have a whistleblower, we do not have a firsthand account of how this all unfurled, and we can't with high confidence issue you an assessment as to how this all played out. This is our best guess. And that may be dissatisfying to some of the policymakers in the White House, but that's where the facts lead. And that's inherently the responsibility of what analysts are tasked with doing right now.
Well, looking ahead, Olivia, the Senate Intelligence Committee will be holding a confirmation hearing for Representative John Ratcliffe next week. He's President Trump's nominee for the Director of National Intelligence. What can we expect to come out of this?
That's right. It's pretty impeccable timing, right? The Senate Intelligence Committee did notice today that the hearing will take place, if all goes well, next Tuesday morning. And you can certainly expect this to be a high stakes and particularly fraught time for any would-be intelligence official to come before a group of senators who are intent on getting some answers on where things stand and what things are going to look like for the rest of this administration. I mean, Congressman Ratcliffe would be the fourth Director of National Intelligence acting or confirmed that this administration will have gone through. He will no doubt be expected to respond to questions about the handling of the coronavirus pandemic. He will no doubt be asked about the outstanding thorny issues related to known U.S. adversaries like Iran, Russia, and increasingly China. His Democratic senators in particular are also probably going to want to exact some promises from the congressman who will be expected to essentially say, I am capable of keeping this community free from partisan influence, something that has come into question given his own background. And I am capable of maintaining a level of transparency with you, my congressional overseers, that the job that I've been tasked with is being done right and, again, following the facts and not political preferences as they arise.
So many critical questions at a moment when we are in the midst still of this crisis. Olivia Gazis for us. Olivia, good to see you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Elaine.